You know that moment. Your phone lights up, and it's not them. You check anyway, again, even though part of you already knows there's nothing new there. The room is quiet, but not peaceful. It's that heavy kind of quiet that makes every little thing feel louder than it is. The coffee goes cold. Their name sits in your chest like unfinished business. And what really gets you isn't just the silence, it's the confusion. Do they miss me at all? Are they relieved? Did I mean anything? Why does it feel like I'm grieving someone who trained themselves not to need me? Was any of it real? Here's the truth most people get completely wrong. When an avoidant goes quiet, it doesn't always mean they feel nothing. A lot of the time, it means they feel too much and only know how to survive it by going numb. You're not crazy for wondering. You're not weak for still caring. And this is not a sign that you imagined the connection. By the end of this video, you're going to understand the 7 emotional stages many avoidant people move through during no contact, why their behavior looks so detached on the outside, what's actually happening beneath the surface, and what this means for your healing whether they come back or not. Let's get into it. Most people think no contact is simple. They think one person misses you, the other person moves on, end of story. But the real truth is way more complicated than that. Because attachment is not just about feelings, it's about protection. And avoidant people are not usually protected by closeness, they're protected by distance. That's the part no one talks about. Most couples believe the person who withdraws is the one who cares less. But the real truth is the person who withdraws is often the one whose nervous system has learned that needing people is dangerous, depending on people is risky, and feeling too much is something you survive by shutting down. So when no contact begins, an avoidant doesn't always experience it the way you think they do. Not as a clean ending. Not as freedom in the simple way people imagine, and not as immediate heartbreak in the obvious way anxious people tend to feel it. They often experience it in layers. First relief, then distance, then distraction, then cracks in the wall, then delayed emotion, then meaning, then one of 2 endings, deeper avoidance or real self-confrontation. That's why trying to read an avoidant by the first few days of silence almost always gives you the wrong story. Because when safety leaves a relationship, the love doesn't always disappear. Sometimes it goes underground. And here's what changes everything. If you understand these stages, you stop romanticizing their silence, and you stop personalizing every delay. You start seeing patterns, real patterns, not because you need to decode them forever, but because clarity is how you finally get your power back. 1. The exhale stage. This is the first stage. And honestly, it confuses almost everyone. Most couples assume no contact hits both people like loss right away. But for an avoidant, the beginning often feels more like pressure release than grief. That doesn't mean the bond meant nothing. It means their nervous system may have experienced the relationship, especially if there was conflict, emotional intensity, or repeated repair attempts, as overstimulation. So when contact stops, the first thing they feel is not always sadness, it's relief. Relief from expectation, relief from emotional demands, relief from feeling watched, needed, or pulled into conversations they didn't know how to handle. Not hatred, not indifference, not closure, just temporary nervous system relief. That matters because most people in relationships misread this stage completely. They see calm and think, wow, they're totally fine. But beneath the surface, what's often happening is more like a smoke detector finally going quiet after blaring for weeks. The silence feels good, not because the house was never important, but because the alarm was exhausting. The disconnecting version sounds like this. See, they haven't reached out. I clearly never mattered. The connecting version, meaning the more truthful interpretation, sounds like this. They may feel relief first because closeness activated their defenses, not because the relationship was fake. And when you understand that, you stop mistaking the first exhale for the final truth. 2. The numbing stage. Here's the part no one talks about. Most people in relationships think pain always shows up as obvious pain, crying, missing you, talking about you, breaking down. But avoidant patterns often work the opposite way. What they feel, they distance from. What hurts, they organize away. This is where deactivating strategies kick in. They tell themselves the relationship wasn't that deep. They focus on your flaws. They suddenly remember all the reasons it wouldn't have worked anyway. They get very logical, very busy, very composed. Because for many avoidant people, emotional suppression feels safer than emotional honesty. If closeness once felt unpredictable, then detachment starts to feel like control, and control feels like safety. So while you may be sitting there feeling the full ache of separation, they may be narrating the breakup in a way that keeps them from touching the ache at all. Their inner monologue sounds like this: I'm better off this way. This was probably for the best. I just need space. I don't want drama. And some of that may even feel true to them in the moment. But here's what nobody explains. Emotional numbing is not the same thing as emotional resolution. You can mute a feeling without moving through it. You can suppress grief without healing it. The disconnecting version sounds like this: they're out partying, posting, acting normal. They never cared. The connecting version sounds like this: they may be performing stability because stability is how they avoid collapse. And when you see that, the silence stops looking so simple. 3. The distraction stage. This is where it gets really interesting. Most couples think if someone is staying busy, they must be moving on. But most avoidant people don't use busyness to process emotion. They use busyness to outrun it. So they throw themselves into work, friends, gym, travel, projects, dating apps, random plans, anything that keeps the inner world from getting too loud. Because stillness is dangerous here. Stillness brings memory. Memory brings feeling. Feeling brings longing. And longing is exactly what avoidant defenses are built to shut down. This isn't a communication hack. This is just what an unhealed protection system does. Most people in relationships don't realize that distraction can become emotional anesthesia. It looks healthy from the outside, productive, even empowered. But beneath the surface, it can be a way of never having to sit in the real. It's like stuffing clothes into a closet and forcing the door shut. From the hallway, the room looks clean. But you and I both know what happens when that door finally opens. The disconnecting version looks like this: they're already dating someone new. I was easy to replace. The connecting version looks like this: they may be using novelty to avoid vulnerability, because being alone with their feelings feels less like healing and more like exposure. And when you understand that, you stop comparing your grief to their performance. 4. The echo stage. And this is the one most couples never figure out. Because eventually, if no contact holds, the distractions get quieter, the relief wears off, the schedule opens up, and the echoes begin. This is when little things start getting through. A song, a street, a restaurant, a random inside joke, the empty side of the bed. The moment they reach for their phone and realize there's no one there to text. Not because they suddenly changed overnight, but because distance has limits. And walls are never airtight forever. Most people in relationships think missing you would immediately lead to action. But with avoidant patterns, that's not always how it works. Because the second they start to feel your absence, they also start to feel the vulnerability that comes with it. So the mind splits. Part of them feels the loss. Part of them says, don't go there. Part of them wonders, do I miss them? And another part quietly says, if I let this in, it's going to wreck me. That internal conflict is real. Their inner world may start whispering things like, why does everything remind me of them? Why do I miss them now? Was I too hard on them? Did they actually make me feel safer than I realized? The disconnecting version sounds like this: if they missed me, they would have reached out already. The connecting version sounds like this: they may be feeling the echo of the relationship for the first time, but they still don't have the emotional capacity to turn toward it. And when that happens, the walls don't fall all at once, but they do begin to crack. 5. The delayed grief stage. And here's what changes everything. This is often the stage that shocks people the most, because this is when the avoidant finally starts feeling what everyone assumed they never felt. Most couples believe grief is immediate if it's real. But for avoidant attachment, grief is often delayed because the first response to pain is suppression, not surrender. So weeks later, sometimes months later, the sadness starts leaking through. Not always dramatically, not always publicly, but privately, internally, and in ways they may not even know how to name. They may feel flat, withdrawn, restless, irritated, unusually tired, emotionally off. Because once the deactivation begins to weaken, all the unprocessed attachment pain can rise at once. And for someone who learned early that emotions are something to contain instead of share, that can feel deeply disorganizing. Not weakness, not manipulation, not some game, but delayed human pain. This is where the internal monologue can sound like, why am I feeling this now? I thought I was over this. Why do I suddenly want to reach out? Why does this feel heavier now than it did then? That's the thing, bro. Avoidant people often don't process loss in real time. They process it when they can no longer keep outrunning themselves. The disconnecting version sounds like this: they took too long. If they cared, they would have shown it sooner. The connecting version sounds like this. They may only now be arriving emotionally at a breakup their body defended against at the beginning. And that's the shift that turns confusion into clarity. 6. The meaning stage. But here's what nobody explains. Feeling pain is one thing. Making meaning of it is another. Most people in relationships think once someone misses you, they'll automatically understand your value. But avoidant people don't just struggle with emotion. They often struggle with interpretation. Because if they start to admit, I miss them, the next question becomes much harder. What does that mean? Does it mean love? Loneliness? Regret? Habit? Ego? Real connection? Fear of being alone? An actual attachment wound opening up? This is where many avoidant people get stuck. They feel something real, but they don't have the language, practice, or emotional presence to stay with it long enough to understand it. And that's why this stage matters so much. Most couples never realize that insight is a skill, not just a feeling, a skill. This isn't about sending a late-night text, not about nostalgia, not about I miss you at 11:48 p.m., but emotional honesty deep enough to ask, what pattern did I keep repeating, and what did it cost both of us? That's a completely different level of awareness. The disconnecting version sounds like this. I miss them. Maybe I should just reach out and see what happens. The connecting version sounds like this. I miss them, but I need to understand whether I'm longing for connection or just relief from discomfort, and whether I actually know how to show up differently. And when someone can do that, they stop seeing love as something that happened to them and start seeing it as something they participated in. 7. The fork in the road stage. This is the final stage. And honestly, man, this is where everything separates. Because after enough silence, enough reflection, and enough emotional pressure, an avoidant usually reaches one of two paths. Path 1 is re-avoidance. Path 2 is real growth. Most couples want the story to end with a message, a return, a confession, a second chance. But the deeper truth is this. No contact doesn't just reveal whether they miss you. It reveals whether they have the capacity to become emotionally available. That's the real question. Some avoidant people feel the loss, touch the grief, recognize your value, and then retreat again. Why? Because awareness without courage changes nothing. They think, yes, I miss them. Yes, I see what I did. Yes, I probably was too withdrawn. And then another voice takes over. But opening up is too risky. Reaching out makes me vulnerable. What if we end up back in the same cycle? What if they need more than I can give? So they disappear deeper. Others do something different. They stop making distance their identity. They stop glorifying self-protection. They stop confusing emotional control with strength. And here's what changes everything. They begin to see that real maturity is not avoiding attachment. It's learning how to stay present inside it. The disconnecting version sounds like this. I've thought about them a lot, but it's probably better to leave it alone. The connecting version sounds like this. I can see my patterns now. If I reach out, it needs to be real, accountable, open, different. Because this isn't a trick for getting someone back. This is what it looks like when someone has learned to love without losing themselves in the process. And when that happens, the relationship stops feeling like a battlefield of defenses and starts feeling like a place where truth can finally breathe. So if you've been on the other side of no contact with an avoidant, hear me clearly. Their silence is not always a clean measure of their feelings, but it is a very clear measure of their current capacity. And that matters. Because you are not just looking for someone who can miss you. You're looking for someone who can meet you. This isn't a checklist. It's an invitation to see relationships more truthfully, to stop chasing mixed signals, stop worshiping potential, and start paying attention to whether someone is actually becoming capable of connection, safety, presence, and repair. When you internalize this, you stop reacting to breadcrumbs and start responding to reality. You stop asking, do they feel something? And start asking, can they do something meaningful with what they feel? That is a different level of self-respect. That is a different level of love.